All right, we're going to get started. Thank you all for joining today's webinar. This is all about navigating change. This is a really exciting topic for AVAIL. It's something that we've been wanting to do for a while, and I think this is kind of the perfect time for us to kind of talk about this and have this kind of open discussion. We're going to go through a couple different items today. Before we do that, introduction to myself. My name is Clay Watson. If you haven't seen me before on a previous webinar, I'm the Director of Customer Success with AVAIL. Rob Snyder is my counterpart and colleague, our Customer Success Manager. And we lead a lot of these webinars to kind of showcase, most of the time we'll showcase features, talk about different workflow topics for the platform. But today we're kind of switching it up. We're looking at something a little bit bigger than just AVAIL. We're kind of expanding that scope a little bit and kind of talking about something that is challenging for a lot of firms and a lot of individuals, a lot of teams across the AEC industry and really across technology, right? So technology is always changing. There's new tools. Every time you turn a new direction, there's a new tool that's offering new features, and deciding on when to change and how to go about that process is a big deal. It's not something that I don't think anyone would take lightly. There's obviously a lot of time and energy and money that's put in to change management and changing technologies and adopting software. And so we think it's really pertinent for our own solution and really kind of looking at the industry as well to kind of talk about this a little bit more, share strategies. I've brought on two of our customers, Jason Detweiler and Victor Lima. We'll have those introductions soon, but they've kind of gone through the AVAIL change management software adoption story, but they've also got a really good perspective and understanding of what it looks like for a firm across all the different technologies that they're interfacing with on a day-to-day basis. And when that time comes, when you're deciding on changing that tool, what that means for the team and how to go about doing that. So I'm going to give you a little introduction. So those of you who are new to AVAIL and maybe kind of new to content management, I'm going to talk about a little bit about what AVAIL is, give you a quick introduction there, and then we're going to dive into the discussion, right? So there are going to be kind of three questions that I'll use to kind of outline our discussion, but I think Jason and Victor are both going to be able to contribute some really unique perspectives and kind of expound upon some of these essential questions through change management as well. And then we're going to go through that discussion with Victor and Jason sharing their stories. And then we're going to open it up for Q&A. So we will have some time towards the end to open that up. If you've got questions for Victor, myself, or Jason, you can feel free to post those, and then we can kind of go through those in the Q&A chat and continue that discussion and provide the feedback that you may be looking for. So as we get started, what is AVAIL? So we see ourselves as an all-in-one content management solution. We are constantly kind of weighing two different aspects of content management. It's the ease of maintaining that content with the ease of consumption. So we offer a variety of different tools to help you manage your content, whether it's tagging and filtering, and then also ease of consumption, searchability, being able to find the content you need as fast as possible to get it into your project and have your teams begin work, right? Get to the necessity of it. There's two core principles of AVAIL. The first is that we are file type agnostic. So these are kind of an assortment of different file types that we kind of most commonly see in AVAIL. But it's something that we kind of hang our hat on, is that we're not limited to just Revit. We're not limited to just AutoCAD or Civil 3D. It's a wide breadth of file types that you can have and index into your content library. So we see ourselves as, again, that all-in-one source of truth for your content library. And it's a way that you can curate, QA, QC, all the documentation, all the different files that live around a project across many different teams. All of that can be supported through AVAIL's interface. The second core principle of AVAIL is we are file location agnostic. So file type agnostic, we support all the different file types. File location agnostic means that we don't actually take your content. We kind of abide by the rules of your file network, wherever that content is sourced. We follow those same rules, whether it be access or location. It's all a representation in AVAIL, but they can live on your local drive, they can live on your network or cloud drives. The files themselves are not going to be moved or changed, but they are going to be represented with high-res previews and a much more advanced searchability to that content in our interface. So those are kind of the two big principles. Again, all-in-one content management solution, file type agnostic, and then file location agnostic. So we allow firms a lot of flexibility on what you can actually support and leverage through Avail, and without changing any of your underlying infrastructure around your file management. All right, so let's dive into the topic of the day. Again, this is navigating change in AEC. So I kind of pulled out some questions. I met with Victor and Jason beforehand just to kind of prep and start to kind of think about some of these ideas that we wanted to cover during today's webinar. And so we're going to it's going to be a loose agenda, loose structure to our conversation, but I am going to turn it over, give Victor and Jason a chance to introduce themselves. But these will be the questions that we'll try to cover over the course of this discussion. So the first is, what does successful software adoption look like? So when you're changing softwares, what does it mean? What are kind of the tells of your teams actually adopting that software within their day-to-day workflow? And what is that how is that defined, right? And that can be a difference, it can be defined differently between different firms. So we're going to get that perspective from Victor and Jason on kind of what they've seen through their experience. The second question is, what strategies are important to help achieve that success? So not only how do you define success, what does that look like, but what are the specific strategies that you can use to make sure that that is achieved, right? And then make sure that you're getting that return on investment of changing your solutions, changing your tools, and making sure that that is widely adopted across the firm. And then three, what are the lessons learned, right? So looking at the big picture, right? How do you define success? What kind of strategies you're using to achieve success? And then what are the lessons learned? So what didn't work, right? Sometimes that's even just as important as what did work. Looking at what didn't work, what are some of the lessons learned? What are things that you can navigate away from, right? Or kind of move away from as you're kind of thinking about your strategies to roll out different technologies and adopt things across the firm. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jason first. Jason, if you want to just kind of give yourself a brief introduction, talk about SMMA, kind of what the firm looks like, kind of the size and scale, and what you kind of cover there.
Yeah, sure. As Clay said, my name is Jason Detweiler. I work with SMMA. I've been there since 2010. The first 10 years of my career there were architecturally focused, working a lot of K-12 schools. And then I made the transition to our design technology group during COVID around that time, and have been really happy in that department since then. SMMA is, I think we're about 235 now. We're architecture, MEP, structural, civil engineering, landscape architecture, graphic design. We do a lot. And so the firm is growing. We're busy. K-12 is our primary sector, but we do S&T, commercial, or higher ed, things like that.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Victor, I'll turn it over to you.
So hey everyone, Victor Lima. I'm the director of digital practice with Diamond Schmidt. Diamond Schmidt, we pretty much are an architectural only company. We do have a small interior design aspect of things, but we are primarily focused on the architectural side of things. We are right now about 350 employees across Canada and US. Majority of our projects are very vast. So we go from concert halls to museums to residential towers and labs. So it's a pretty vast range, and that requires a lot of content to be managed as well in that sense. As part of the digital practice, I've been since 2018. Yeah, it's been a while. And it's good to see the growth around the office and how we've been expanding and getting more diverse projects around.
Fantastic. Thank you, Victor. So let's go and dive into it. Looking at that first question as kind of the leading question, kind of looking at both your Avail story and really kind of generally technology across the firm. Jason, I'm going to turn it back over to you to kind of start things off on um, your kind of general idea and understanding of navigating change, kind of what that means, and then what is kind of software adoption? What does that success look like for you, not only with Avail, but with the larger kind of technologies that you're using across the firm?
Yeah, so when you prompted this question, I went to the guy who runs our department, Dave Darling, runs DT, and posed that question to him to see what his take was. And it was an interesting one. It was a little bit different, perhaps, than mine. But his was he's like, when people start coming to us to express their excitement over the software, um, it represents a cultural shift. So it's not just something that's going to burn out and fizzle fast, or it's definitely not something that's going under the radar. It's something that they're seeing and they're excited about. So regardless of the state of the software that we're rolling out, if people are really excited about it and they're coming to us and being proactive about it, that sort of represents a very successful rollout for us. We When we adopted Avail, we were going through an interesting change also with our file structure. We were making the transition to SharePoint, and with the majority of our files, not our BIM files, but our regular files. So the firm, I think it was a rough time. The firm was in a little bit of a shell shock situation as we were going through that. And I think the SharePoint transition took a lot of the abuse. We were a little bit more of a smoother transition moving our content to Avail. So yeah, that was a little bit easier.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for that. Victor, how about you on your side, kind of rolling out Avail or, kind of looking at that bigger picture on, what that story looked like for Diamond Schmidt on change management and software adoption, how you define that?
I think like the first part really to define what is successful is like when people don't realize they're using a new software, right? So it's like when process and workflows are very similar or they're very easy to understand. So softwares that people don't need too much training or is just easy for them to get access to and use it. I think this really helps a lot of the successful adoption around. So people don't have to change their mentality the way how Jason said, like culture shift. Sometimes that have to happen. Sometimes that doesn't really need to happen. You're just changing which software you leveraging or the interface around it. Um, when it comes to our deployment of Vail in itself, so we were actually on our second content management system and
Mhm.
looking for the third one because the second one wasn't really working as well. We were getting a lot of feedback from people coming to us like, oh, we cannot find, it doesn't work, it's too slow. And people were just going back into the actual file explorer and using the families from there instead of using the management system. So we were like, okay, so this is really time to change and time to find something that can be more easy to use and is actually doing what it's supposed to do. We did a lot of research around the industry and it was pretty much between two softwares. And at the end of the day, Avail really stood out as being the one to go. And because we already had a content management system, the movement was actually quite smooth because we already had all the structure in there. We had all our files and as Clay mentioned at the beginning, we didn't really have to change how we do things because Avail literally just takes the way we have and put it up. And people really just used. We didn't have to do that much training. It was pretty easy to navigate and so forth. But I think the adoption itself is not just a one time and done. It actually is a constant update or reminding people and make sure that they are also going back and using it.
Okay, great. Yeah. Anything that you pulled out there, Jason, that is kind of similar or different than SMA?
Yeah, it's actually a similar story. We were transitioning. We were on our first content management platform, but we were transitioning because we were just tired of the lack of resources. And it came down to basically two different content management platforms. And I was going to get into this a little bit later, but it was really about the ease of use for the consumers. There was another platform that was really almost open source and offered a lot of opportunity to really pop the hood and see analytics and control it yourself. But that was a great tool, but it was more of we want the users to be able to consume it quickly, fast, and easy with as little pain as possible. I was also going to say, in addition, is when somebody comes to me and says I can't find something on Avail, I mean that's a success for me. The content wasn't there, so they're looking for it, but they didn't just quietly go look for it elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because content integrity is a tough part to keep up with when there's a lot of people at a firm and a lot of places to go get content. And so when somebody says I can't find something, even though it sounds like a failure, that's really a big success in my mind.
That's an interesting take. Yeah, I've never thought about it like that on, yeah, not finding something as far as like on the technology side, we're always looking for ways that there's no way that they can't find anything, right? But it's a great perspective it has. At least they're looking, right? They're looking in the right place and they're communicating if they can't find something, which is, I think, yeah, it is a success. Let's kind of transition, Victor. I'll turn it back over to you. Let's look at a little bit deeper on you kind of talked a little bit about the process, right? What that looks like over time, and then the kind of the journey of change management. What are the kind of the strategies, looking at, from onboarding and beyond that. So I think that, you're not gonna you might onboard a software in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, but I think change management and software adoption is a little bit more of a journey. And then, yeah, so if you could kind of talk a little bit more about that process and some of the strategies that you've seen kind of be helpful during that process and what's been kind of successful at Diamond Schmidt.
Sure. I think the first part is really getting people to be involved as part of the process, so they're not really surprised that things are changing. That's kind of like really the first take, not just get them by surprise. Make sure that you let them know, look, does this change? When is it changing? And so forth. So they start getting used to the idea of the change. If you just come with something new and ta-da, this is new for you on a Monday, everyone will be screaming, and that's already like a big blocker for people to join into a new software itself. The second one is how to get them involved, right? Like an interesting take that we did for Aveo was actually we are a design firm. So we open up contests for people to do our cards and really use that as a way of getting them involved. What are the cards that we have? So they slowly, without noticing, they were understanding how we were structuring the platform in that way of how to things get sorted within the software itself before it's even get launched. Because that's the big thing. Like we talked about the delivery to the office in general, but there is still a lot of groundwork that has to happen from the back end to make sure that families are properly brought up, or like anything, even like needed training, we have to do training. All that has to be prepared by the design technologies team or digital practice team to really get into how we're going to be planning that. Generally, people think about it, rolling out to the office is a 1 hour thing that we do for the whole office, but the actual change, Avail right now, we are 5 years pretty much with Avail. We never really stop changing things around to make sure that people are aware of it. Like softwares change, new functionalities, new things come along, and not necessarily I would say we are the early adopters, to be honest, but at the end of the day, when things get added, we need to make sure people are aware of it. And needs change as well. And I think like we're pretty much getting to a point where we are this year revamping how our Avail is structured, right? And I think this is the part that it comes down to change management. It's not a once and done, is a constant change, and make sure that you hear the feedback from people and are applying that as you go along.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's an awesome perspective there. Jason, how about you at SMA?
Yeah, so for us, at least for me, as we're rolling this out, we were very vocal. Like Victor said, it was important that the team knew we were transitioning. And like I said, we were also transitioning from one content platform to another. So the concept of finding content somewhere on a platform was there, and how to use it was kind of there. But for me, it's really about sort of mitigating fear, confusion, and old habits. And so I think people are typically resistant to change because they don't really they don't know what's coming down the pipeline. So again, being vocal with them. One thing that we do that's been really successful is actually creating videos, tutorial videos, and suggested not just tutorials, but just suggestions about workflows that they could be employing. And when we do it in the video format, we find that it's a little bit more engagement. We do have OneNote files, and we have a hub that we keep documentation on, but people are a little bit more resistant to find and read something as opposed to flipping through some YouTube videos or something, you know. So, so mitigating the fear was really, walking them through it, holding their hand and showing them, but not repeating ourselves. So here's the video, watch this. This is really good. Plus, Avail's always rolling out new stuff. So, when pallets come out, we show you, hey, look, this is how you could work with your team and use pallets to do that, right? So those were great. And then I mentioned old habits. So when it comes to the platform transition, it was like pushing somebody into the pool. We took the old platform away, so there was no leaning back on that. You had to use a new one. But those pesky archive projects wouldn't go away, right? People can go back to those project folders. They can pull out old broken families or things that have just been mutilated and continue to push them in their projects. So we have we use Teams. There's a Teams channel. When people have content, or they need content, they have content, they want to get on Avail, hit us up. We'll put it on there. We'll clean it up. We'll review it with you. If we need new content, again, we set up, our interiors department has really been the best at this. We set up sort of little champion teams where they continually meet every 2 weeks or so and review content. So they stick to it. And then I work with them after they've reviewed it to make sure that I can library it properly for them, make sure it matches our BIM standards. And then, yeah, I think trying to evaluate what people are using on their projects currently has been an interesting, not hurdle, but something we've been stepping into. Our school projects are rather large, and so the models sometimes get up near a gig and gets really heavy. So harvest tool has been helpful. We just I'll go through and just harvest everything and analyze what they've been using and how many times they might be using something in a project, and then saving them some work. Because really, content management isn't me, it's all of us. I really need the village to pull together and tell me what they need and review what they need and stuff like that. So keeping them involved, I suppose, is a really important part. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, Victor, how about you? I mean, Jason, let's kind of talk about a little bit about kind of the training and onboarding and kind of having those videos and kind of documentation around software and how to use it. Did you do something similar with Diamond Schmidt on providing that type of material for your team?
Yeah, I think tapping to a couple of things that Jason spoke about. I think the first one that has been quite helpful for us is the Dropbox. We actually use Avail as our Dropbox location itself. So we created a channel that everyone has ability to upload families, and once a month, our BIM team actually reviews the families and brings into the overall office strategy itself. But we are still the same place that Jason mentioned in relation to old projects. I think getting people out of opening older files and bringing it in, especially once we go over template changes or adjustments on the families or changes on the Revit side that makes family break. So we want to make sure that those are fixed in Avail, but then as people keep opening the older files, they going to be bringing broken families. But when it comes to the rollout strategy, we are a little bit more hands-on. We had a lot of success in the past in actually getting people together. We have a big room in our office and get people together, sit down. Sometimes we tell them bring your laptops and we're gonna walk you through. So we do a quick 5 minutes presentation, but then it's dive deeper as a lab session and how to do it, what are the things that you need to express and so forth. We've seen that a lot more successful on our end. We have a learning team and as part of our surveys and so forth. So they actually found that was the learning objective that people wanted to use the most. But it doesn't mean that we do not have videos. So we do have a learning management system that we create paths when people join the office. So we get this is the foundation that you need to know. as you join the office. So you know
Mhm.
all the tools that we have, all the things that we do. But generally, if it's something that people are already there, we have a lot more hands-on labs.
Yeah. Okay, cool. No, that's really great perspectives as well. If you can, I'd like to kind of talk about this kind of goes along, I think, side by side with just strategies for success. But I think there's probably along the road, right, as you're adopting software and changing things across a firm, there's obviously going to be challenges, right? There's going to be some maybe some pushback. But if you could talk a little bit more about just some of those, maybe an example that you know of, either with Avail or a different software, how you've kind of navigated those conversations with if it's an individual or if it's with another leadership on, the best course of action. Like how do you go from there once as you're trying to adopt a software? How do you navigate those conversations when there is pushback or there is some sort of objection to the change? Victor, I'll just start with you.
Um, I think when it comes down to focusing on the when it comes to change management, it's a little bit of a jargon, but you have the early adopters, you have the middle people, and then you have the slaggers and
Yeah.
the opposition. So a lot of the times we don't really need to worry too much about the early adopters. They're really there to help you. So if they're not jumping into as you start bringing, so something's wrong. So you probably have to go back and figure it out why even the early adopters are not really joining you on that discussion. But once you have them in and start using them to bring the middle people into the discussion, um, you don't really need to focus too much on the opposition. That's usually what we do because we get to the point that 60-80% of the office is using, and they are the ones that actually get the people that don't want it to adopt using it because if they don't use it, they're not really going to be part of the overall infrastructure that's
Mhm.
being set up. Um, so I'll probably say that's a little bit on how we handle that part, and how
Yeah.
we define like, is it going in the right direction or not, and start moving around and make sure that we have the right tools for that.
Yeah, to echo some of that, I think for us it's imperative to identify what's causing the pushback. It's not the person isn't just being, mean to be mean, right? Pushing back on it because they're just stubborn. Um, Sometimes it's, lack of knowledge. Sometimes it is actually like the workflow is suffering for some reason. You know, I think the Windows 11 experience with Avail, not to throw that
Mhm.
out there, but
Oh yeah.
that was a little bit of a hurdle for us for a second. For people that were using Avail and then all of a sudden it was glitchy and crashing on them, they would kind of pull back a little bit. So we, again, vocal with them saying, hey, Avail's working on it. Autodesk is working on it. And so getting that kind of stuff. And then, maybe it is the workflow and we have to change how we approach something. It's not necessarily it's the whole software needs to go and we need to transition. It's more of just feeling it out and understanding what's best for the needs of the firm and best for the users. So, make sure they know what they need to know and then making sure we are taking the best course of action.
Yeah, because I think at the end of the day, what we want with software is really be more efficient and effective, right? So if
Yeah.
that's kind of like
Yeah.
the whole goal on bringing tools around, and
Mhm.
if we can get to that, that's a problem. Right?
Yeah. Right. Okay, cool. Let's move on to kind of my final questions, and then we'll kind of do kind of a wrap up, and I'll let Victor and Jason kind of add on anything else that they want to kind of tell around this story and kind of their experiences. But let's talk about some things that you've kind of learned in this process, so things that didn't work in the past, things that you tried and it just you had to change, or you had to change your own process around change management and software adoption. Jason, I'll start with you this time, kind of talking about, yeah, what didn't work? What are things that you tried and didn't work with Avail or with any other software that you've tried to, roll out firm-wide?
Yeah. I'll stick with the Avail thread. There are other ones I could talk about, but I think I mentioned earlier that crowdsourcing for us is really important. We're at the phase now
Yeah,
where the software is working really well, but we need to make sure the content is refined and more content
yeah.
is being added and developed. And that's not just Revit families, that's details and then
Mhm.
as we're growing, it's going to be other file formats as well, right? So crowdsourcing is imperative, but it's also really, really tough to crowdsource in a firm that's focused on billable work.
Yeah.
This is kind of a lot of overhead stuff.
Mm.
And so crowdsourcing, the initial enthusiasm is high. You can meet with a group of people and talk about all these great details we're going to develop, but then the distractions creep in and, the billable work takes over and a project gets half done. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the hat that I've put on now is the PESC, the person that keeps the ball rolling when people do get away from the billable time and can actually help me refine. Um, Again, we've been working with the Teams channel and trying to make sure that people are being vocal. I think coming back to after a project is done, it's easy to just run for the next project. But I think having a review session at the end of a project to talk about the Revit model in general is a really important thing to do. Pinpoint families, pinpoint details from that project as we're moving on to the next ones that we can harvest and grab a hold of. So I think as far as the Avail one, that's the biggest lesson learned is the distractions to keeping this content moving forward is really, really tough.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that perspective. Victor, how about you?
I think I'll go a little bit more into broader high level discussion on this one. As on the lesson learned side, first thing that we try is like really not try to be too harsh or to try to speed up too much your software change. Um, we have a software that we wanted to make a switch, and pretty much in 6 months we were like, okay, so you can only use that software. And pretty much what happened, people just, okay, I cannot do my work, I cannot deliver um, effectively anymore, and it got into um, like the leadership level and then pushing down to like, okay, let's go back to what we had because people were used to it. So I think the first, like using that as a lesson, like first one, don't try to switch too rapidly. We are kind of right now on another path that it's going to be taking about 4 years for a whole completely change. I think that depends quite of what you're trying to change, right? Like if it's a software that everyone uses on a day-to-day basis, you can't just come and say you're changing, you cannot use it anymore. You have to learn this new thing. You have to slowly get people used to the idea of change, how to use and get them familiar with it. As Jason said, like before is all about billable hours. So if we actually are reducing billable hours to our projects, that's a problem from our end on implementation. So we have to make sure we can support that and make the transition a little bit more smooth in that sense. Um, the second one is really getting the leadership to really understand. Like some of the softwares, that bottom up approach is pretty good, but sometimes you actually gotta have to go a top down on like we have to go this way, we gotta do it. So making sure that your leadership team understands why we are changing the reasons and the whys. That actually speeds up the process and makes sure that once they're on their project, someone on their team comes down like, oh, I cannot do this because of the new software. Like, no, you can. Like, I know you can. So make sure that they understand the overall delivery. It's pretty important. If it's some of those like day to day, I think a lot of the times we look around like Avail from our end, it wasn't really too hard because the one that we had before was not working. So people were actually quite happy with the change and we didn't have to be pushing them to the transition itself. But when it's something that is it's working, but either like prices are going too crazy or the license structure is changing and we can't support that anymore. So that's when the trick comes into change management and make sure that people understand the whys that's happening.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, understanding the whys is always something that we're thinking about technology as we're developing Avail and things, adding features, understanding the why behind what we're doing and the reasoning is always super important. So that's a great point. Jason.
yeah. Speaking to the speed of adoption, Avail was a little bit easier to adopt at a faster rate, but to go back to the SharePoint example where we basically took our whole folder structure on our network and put it on to SharePoint, it was we were finding a lot of teams. It was one of those band-aids. We just said, this is how you do it now on these new projects. And so a lot of teams started downloading all their stuff and putting it back on the network, and then there's the confusion about where's the source of truth. And so it's I just think it's sometimes it's two steps forward, one step back, and you just have to be comfortable with that and knowing you're going to get that step back eventually. It's just again being vocal with them and the speed of it. Yeah, maybe we went a little too fast. I don't know. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think patience is a big one. Understanding that there's inherent patience to change management and software adoption, and it does. Yeah, I think it's a good way to describe it as yeah, taking two steps forward, one step back, and just kind of inching closer and closer to that adoption kind of win for the firm. All right, cool. We did have a couple of questions that came in, but before that, I want to give Victor and Jason some time. If you all had anything else that you wanted to add, we kind of talked about those three items. We talked about how you all defined software adoption success, what that looked like at your firms. We went over the strategies that you implemented through onboarding and communication and things like that, and then we also talked about the lessons learned. But Victor, I'll turn it over to you. Any kind of closing thoughts or kind of summation of your experiences? Anything else that you would want to add or share with the group?
Uh, yes, I think like at the end of the day, like change management, it depends a lot on how your company is structured. It there is no magical template that you can just bring it in and use. It all depends on how many people you have, how adoption or how acceptive of change people are, and your leadership and structure and so forth. So it's like there are so many variables there. It doesn't really have a one template that works for everyone. You're always going to have to make adjustments and make sure that things are usable in your own office or in your company. Like if you're in a bigger office, it might be a little bit trickier. If it's a smaller one, it might be easier because you have more communication and direct contact to people. But it's really like communication is critical in change management, and make sure that people are part of the change. They're not just being told to change. I think that's really the biggest takeaway of change management.
Great, Jason.
Yeah, I think it was interesting working with the Avail team because you guys will have a really great approach, I think, to we'll call it marketing, but it's also product development and things like that. So, I mean, I think Randall's on the call. I talk to Randall a couple times a year, and I talk to your team all the time. So there's something about how tapped in you guys are to the user experience that sort of is rubbing off on me and helping me understand my user's experience. With that said, I would say our firm is very lucky, and Victor's team is probably pretty lucky to have a dedicated design technology or team that can be the champions on this. If I can see how a smaller firm would struggle a little bit more because you're all wearing all the hats, where I get to wear a very specific hat, be a champion, not worry so much about the billable work, make those check-ins to see take the temperature of how people are feeling about the software, and help steer that ship without being too distracted by other stuff.
Fantastic. No, those are great takeaways, and we appreciate the shout out there. Yeah, I think we see ourselves as partners in a lot of these with our customers. So it's all about sharing that journey with them and understanding kind of what challenges they're facing, and having discussions about those things, ways that the software can help with those challenges and make it easier to adopt and make it more intuitive, make the software more intuitive. So. Yeah, that's awesome to be aligned there. So we did have a couple of questions that came through in the chat. If you do have questions at this point, feel free. There's a Q&A option on Zoom that you can kind of post any questions you have for Victor or Jason. One of the first questions that came through from Joachim PC, they were asking like, what content management systems were your firm switching from? Victor, we can start with you.
We were previously with Hive. And before that, we had Kiwi tools.
Okay. And Jason?
Yeah, we were transitioning from Unify. At the time, we were looking for a more agnostic platform, as Clay was pointing out. And I think Unify also at the time was very focused on an acquisition
Yeah.
with Autodesk. So they were a little bit dead in the water, I felt like. There wasn't much innovation happening. So yeah, we were happy to go over.
Mhm. Nope. And then Tom Kemp had a question. As new content is added to Avail, how do you communicate that to all of the users? And then he says, we have users that keep going to legacy projects for content we've added to the library. Jason, I'll start with you this time.
Yeah, that varies a little bit for us. I mean, we have the hub, and you can do our hub post to say, hey, there's a whole bunch of content, but I'm not giving them a full list of all the content that's getting loaded up on a regular basis. Um, this is a little tough one to answer. Being vocal with them, talking about that, tackling it. So our firm is somewhat large, especially on the architecture side. And so breaking it into the smaller groups. So we have studios, so we have the K-12, and we have corporate. So it's easier to talk to that group specifically and say, hey, you know, the stuff you used on the last project, it's all right here for you. It's ready to go. I did this. I harvested it. And hopefully that sticks. But I don't have a real good answer for that other than making sure they understand that Avail is the place to be going. I've been debating on finding ways to cut the umbilical cord back to the old project. Sometimes it's a little hard when they're in CA or something like that, but getting it archived and away from their eyes would be nice. The versioning in Revit helps, I think, too, when it's a large project and somebody realizes they have to upgrade a project and then save it to their drive. It's so much easier on Avail. Just make sure they're aware of that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Cool.
think
Victor.
from our end, we have a few ways that we try to make people aware. It's like the first one, we have an intranet in the office. So a lot of the times we don't do one upgrade, we do bulk uploads to the platform. So like that happens once a month, once every 2 months. And we do quick posts on our intranet saying new content is available. You can check it out. Um, the second one that we do is when we have initiatives with typology specific. So sometimes we are further developing our labs library or our institutional library. And as part of those initiatives, content is created. And then we have presentations to the office on what's new around. And the third one is really the BIM coordinators as projects start. It's making people aware. It's like, oh, this is like a lot of people, we know which projects they're coming from, and we say, oh, we harvest from that project, so you don't need to go back. So I'll probably say those are the three approaches that we take on making sure that people are aware.
Okay, great. Joe has another question. Approximately how many users in your firms are engaging with Avail on a daily basis? And then a second question, approximate size of your overall content library migrated over to Avail. Victor, I'll start with you.
From a day-to-day use, we have about 200 users using Avail from our end out of the 250 architects around. A lot of the CA projects, they don't really use as much content management because they're already too down to the road. But the approximate size as well on the transition, we had about 10,000, 11,000 families at the time of transition.
Okay.
Yeah, we're a little bit smaller on that. I think I'll answer the how many users are accessing it question a little differently. I would say a little less than half of the users that could be accessing it are probably accessing it daily. And maybe that's because they have the content they need for that day and they're not necessarily searching for stuff. But I think we have, again, different parts of our firm are more engaged with Avail and are using it. The interior designers at our firm are fantastic. They know that's where they go for it. They're making details. They're really building that up. Some of the other departments are a little hard. I have been pushing. We're not quite at the point where we can do this successfully probably yet, but I've been really pushing for sort of senior designers to really engage in Avail, people who might not be in Revit, because
Yeah.
the thumbnails are amazing, especially on the details, and getting a senior designer to either send a link to one of their draftsmen and say, hey, we need this in the project, or even, take an image of the file, mark it up and share it with DT or share it with the firm some way else. That's a big goal of mine, is to really get them engaged with it as well. As far as content on Avail, again, we're a little bit smaller. We have probably around 400, 500 details drawn on there of various stages. Some of them are from Unify and are kind of pretty old, and we need to review them. And then I think we have a few thousand families, less than 5,000 families on there, but across all the disciplines, it's probably a couple thousand.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Moving on, another question from Steve Bennett. He says, I'm curious, do you present channels with content pre-upgraded to each version of Revit in use at your company, or do you just keep content in the lowest running version of Revit and let it upgrade as it loads into projects? Jason, you can start with
Yeah, I
this.
can go first on this one. We keep it in the oldest version. So right now we're running 22 as our oldest, and so everything's in 22. With families, I have a Dynamo script or some sort of anything you could probably run it. I use Dynamo to quickly upgrade the whole folder, right? The whole directory if I needed to when we moved to 2023. If you ignore the Windows 11 hiccup, it was really pretty seamless to load something in, let it upgrade for you. So there was no need for us to do the separate folders.
Great.
Yeah, I would say we're on the same boat as well. So we'll keep it the lowest version. We will actually be a little bit lower than Jason. 2021 is our lowest version around. Um, when it comes to the bigger projects, they really wanted to stick around. And at the end of the day, like we are really excited to the auto upgrade that Avail is bringing, because that's gonna really help and support people not get confused on seeing duplicated families, even though we have a filter for people to click and not see it. That's
No.
one cause of confusion that sometimes people have.
All right, great. Another question came through from Jason Spanovich. Any advice, any advice for smaller size firms when leadership dismisses tools because they don't think we're big enough to need them? It often feels like powerful solutions are only seen as relevant for the largest firms, when in reality, smaller and mid-sized firms could benefit just as much, if not more, from the efficiency and structure these tools provide. Victor, you can go first.
Maybe I can jump in. Before I joined Diamond 8 years ago, I was actually working on a smaller firm. We were 45 people. And I think that the big part, and kind of like I was creating the design technology department of the firm at the time, and trying to actually define like why do we need them. Good things is doing pilots and really trying to capture like ROI, how much time people are saving in regards to the price of the tool itself. That it's pretty good even for smaller and mid-sized firms, that if they can save people's time and be able to get more projects, that's a good way of really showcasing to leadership, even on smaller and mid-sized firms. The second one is really trying to, if um, it's kind of like creating a trajectory on how you wanted the firm to go on software or growth within the office, and see how that correlates to software adoption itself. So those two ones were pretty what I used on the previous one when I was working at a smaller size firm itself.
This one's a little tougher for me to answer because I've been spoiled a little bit with SMMA. But I was going to say, I mean, it's really the whole goal here is standardization, and that's going to speed us up, but it's also going to make us look better as a firm when the detail's correct. Somebody didn't make a mistake when they were bringing it in or redrawing it. So I don't know how often things get messed up on your drawings, but that's one big perk. The other thing is maybe perhaps it's a stepping stone situation where I don't know how the small firm is managing their content now. It's a container file or something like that. If you had a somewhat of a robust container file where you were pulling standard details from or pulling standard families from, that could potentially be like, hey, look, it's large enough now where we should make it more fluid for people and put it on a platform where they don't have to, grab it from the container file. They can just drag and drop it into their project from Avail. So stepping stone, perhaps.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for that. All right, excellent. One thing I did want to mention, I know Jason, you brought up the Windows 11 issue. So if we do have any current customers on, just going to give a little bit more background on what was going on with Windows 11. Through our kind of research and development on that issue, there was a significant performance issue when loading objects from Avail to Revit. And what we were able to determine was that it was kind of a core piece of Autodesk code that was causing an issue as we were trying to process and upgrade files into Revit. So we've actually, most recently, within the last month or so, Autodesk has released new versions to address that issue. And that is for 23, 25, and 26 of Revit. We're still waiting on the release from Autodesk to address it in 2024. But it is something that again, it's a core piece of Autodesk code that we were kind of had our hands tied in a lot of ways. We tried to do as much as possible to mitigate some of that performance, but it was a part of being flexible on our end and trying to navigate some of the issues that Autodesk had brought to our attention. So
Yeah, I'll say you guys were very quick with a temporary patch anyway until Autodesk could get their stuff together. You guys were very quick.
yeah. But
Yeah,
yeah, we'll be
Autodesk
sending
always
out.
takes forever.
What was that, Victor?
Autodesk always takes forever to fix anything, and
Yeah,
which is
yeah. We
interesting
we
to see
were
2024 is still not there.
Right, exactly. So yeah, we've been sending out kind of regular communication, and we do have a Help Center article on just the whole issue itself and kind of the updates that are being posted. So we are monitoring that very, very closely and waiting for 2024 to get released. All right, cool. So that wraps up the questions in the queue. Nothing else so far. Um, I'll go and move on to actually just thank you, Victor and Jason. I think this was a really fruitful, very helpful, very practical conversation. And again, I think this is something that we could probably have this webinar every year and have new perspectives and new takeaways. And because again, technology is changing, we're always adopting new things and trying to be more efficient, which requires change sometimes across our teams. So. Thank you for Victor and Jason. We really appreciate you all participating and providing your stories. As far as what's next, so a couple of different avenues here. So whether you're a Avail customer or not, there's a couple of different people that you can reach out to. If you're not an Avail customer, Will Rouse is our sales director. If you'd like to kind of talk about this a little bit more with him and talk about some of the strategies that we implement here at Avail, feel free to do so. Give him an email, and he'll be back from vacation next week to get in touch with you. But if you are an Avail customer, contact customer success. Contact myself, contact Rob Snyder. Our emails are here. We always love to kind of have these kind of consultative discussions with customers and really kind of understand the challenges that they're facing on a day-to-day, year-to-year basis, and look at ways that, as a software company, how can we provide solutions to help with that, and help kind of be intuitive and make it easier to adopt across the firm and provide tools that make teams more efficient overall. We do have an upcoming webinar. If we're looking ahead, we've got one planned for November 5th. As of right now, that one is going to be really kind of talking about, kind of going back to the note I had at the very beginning, talking about Avail being content agnostic or file type agnostic. We're looking at different ways and different firms that have used different strategies to manage content outside of Revit. So obviously, we've got a majority of firms using it for families and detail management, but there are a lot of other file types out there, whether it's photos or Miro boards or Bluebeam. There's a lot of different ways that you can manage that content in Avail, and we're going to kind of bring a couple of other firms in to talk about what strategies, what kind of workflows they've developed around these additional file types and how it's being used across different teams at their companies. So that'll be really great. Another thing that we've been wanting to do, because again, we get kind of pulled into the Revit sphere, which makes a lot of sense, but there is just a bigger scope to Avail that we also like to highlight as much as we can. All right, we're here right at the top of the hour. We appreciate everyone who joined today. We appreciate the questions that came through. Double checking that we don't have any last questions, but again, this is a process. Change management, navigating change is a journey, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions to the Avail team. And again, thank you for Victor and Jason for joining and sharing your stories. Thank you
Yeah,
all.
thank you for hosting.
Thanks, Clay.